Hey everybody, thanks for coming by tonight. Appreciate it. My name is Amit. I'm head of prototyping at FiftyThree. This is Andrew Allen. He's one of the co-founders and head of design at FiftyThree, and we're very happy to be here today and talk to you about, as advertised, the transition that we made, that we decided to go through with our app from moving from the iPad to the iPhone. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as an intro to say like that what we have not advertised there in the little blurb is that, you know, when you think about moving from an iPad to an iPhone, you're thinking, well, you got to redesign the screen, the dimension of the screen, right? That's the thing that comes first, right? But we actually want to unpack some of the higher level ideas that we had to go through as a company, thinking about product, thinking about the people who use and love our product, thinking about the process that we're going to go through. And talk about some of those higher things that maybe aren't that visible typically from people looking from the outside in. So we want to share some of that with you. Hopefully it pertains not only to our process, but also digital design of digital products in general. And just one more thing worth saying.
It's going to be a couple minutes.
Once it works, is that maybe I won't say it until it works. Yeah. So one of the things worth saying is that we're going to try to present the whole presentation from the iPhone app. So we'll see how that goes. So yeah. So we're gonna try to present from this, which sort of true to form, to kind of also speak to kind of some of the things that we're trying to do with paper and with the iPhone. I'm gonna let Andrew go through some of the context of the kind of the few months leading to us deciding to go and do this for the iPhone, and then lead you through some of the things that I mentioned, the higher level processes. All the way down, then we'll talk to the very practical things that we went through with these ideas in mind. So without further ado, right after he chugs his beer.
All right, so this, if you know paper, which it sounds like a lot of you do, we launched paper on the iPad back in March of 2012, so almost 4 years ago now. And it did quite well when it first launched. We won a lot of awards. It was App of the Year. But I think, you know, beyond that, what really excited us was just all the fantastic things that people would do with it. And so, of course, we had some amazing illustrations and some fun stuff around interesting characters, but I think what was really interesting to us was to see how different creative people started to take to it and use it in very different ways. So this is an example of some product design. It was actually very popular and still very popular among teachers and students. So a lot of teachers creating curriculum for their students, so sketching out different slides that they would then share with their students. This is an example of some sketchnoting, so when people go to conferences, they'll take notes visually. Some examples of diagramming, so, you know, not the audience we were really aiming for at first, but a lot of product managers and business developers and that sort of thing started to take to it. A lot of architects really liked it. This is an example of more, larger scale, city planner. And then, of course, a lot of product designers really liked it. And so I thought I'd do just a quick demo for those of you who are less familiar with paper. So paper is basically the best and fastest way to just capture your ideas very quickly. And so you can just very easily sketch out an interface in this example. And we do some interesting things where we can actually help correct some things like shapes, where we improve it, and then you can quickly go through and fill in some of these shapes if you want to just add some color to it. So it's basically that quick scratch pad or that pad of post-it notes that's always with you. So it really opened up what we think this bigger opportunity was. We saw a lot of people using paper on the iPad, and we just had this, this understanding that we wanted to go to mobile at some point. And it sounded like a very simple question. Let's just take your iPad app and shrink it down for mobile. But it really started to open up all these deeper layers. And the more we started going down that path, we found that we needed something of a framework to think about some of these larger questions that we had. And so I come from a filmmaking background myself, and I tend to apply a lot of film and story analogies to things. And so there's a great script writer called Michael Arndt who wrote Little Miss Sunshine, won an Oscar for it. And he had a great way of breaking down great stories, which is, he had these three levels. At the sort of surface level, you have these very practical dilemmas. So what is the hero trying to accomplish? Luke Skywalker is trying to blow up the Death Star, or Frodo's trying to throw the ring into the volcano. The next level below that, you have these emotional dilemmas. So that's like, does the guy and the girl get together in the end? Does the family stay together? Things like that. The level below that, you have this sort of philosophical dilemma, which is good versus evil, these larger sort of societal questions. So great stories tend to have all these levels within them, and they tend to address them. And so, for example, if you look at Little Miss Sunshine, have you guys seen the movie? Who's seen the movie here? Just to get a sense. Okay, that's good. That's good. So the practical stakes in this case are, if you remember the story, it's a family trying to get their daughter who's like obsessed with pageant shows, and she's not all what you would consider to be like pageant material, but she's really excited about getting to a pageant. She wants to go there. Meanwhile, her dad is like, ironically, this guy trying to sell this sort of how to be successful book series, and yet he's unsuccessfully selling it. And so it's sort of this dysfunctional family, but at the practical level, what they're trying to do is get to this pageant show, and there are all these obstacles in the way. Their car breaks down, the family starts falling apart, are they gonna make it there or not? Then a level deeper at the emotional level, it's really a question of like, is the family gonna stay together, this very dysfunctional family? Everyone wants to leave, the son is very rebellious and not talking, so are they actually gonna hold together as a family? And then at the deepest level, there's really a philosophical question around, what really defines success in the society that we live in? Which definition do you subscribe to? So it's sort of very, very succinctly kind of traversed through all of those. So when we were thinking about paper for the iPhone, we sort of took a similar journey. So at the practical level, I think we were looking at, well, what does it mean to just build a responsive app that works on the iPad and works on the phone? That itself had its own challenges. But then at an emotional level, it was, how do we really stay true to the brand that we are, the brand that 53 is, the brand that paper is? What is that brand? What do people love about it? And how do we stay true to that? Then at a philosophical level, it was really an even deeper question about like, where are we going with paper? And what does it mean? Where does paper evolve into for us? And it started to raise a question around what does it mean to sort of be creative outside of single individuals and more on a team level. So we're going to take these kind of in reverse order. So at the philosophical level, we're asking what is paper, and I think we very quickly came to this understanding that paper, as much love as we kind of put into a lot of these things up here, you couldn't really say that paper was, in its essence, its user interface, its model, its navigational model. We didn't really think, look, paper wasn't really just about drawing. And paper wasn't really just about the sort of innovative gestures that we come up with. When we really stepped back, we thought, look, paper is really about where your ideas begin. It's about this very sort of messy early phase where you're just trying to capture something very quickly in its rawest form. It's that napkin sketch that you do when you just need to get an idea down. It's the pad of Post-its next to your desk. So really, it's also started to lead to this question of like, paper was great at sort of answering the question of you need to get your own idea down, but we started to open that up and say, look, people need to share their ideas for them to mean anything. And ideas don't really mean anything unless you can work with others on them and share them. So we started to move down this path of ideas need to be shared. So that's kind of what some of the philosophical side started to open up for us. Then on the emotional side, what was at stake was really how do we stay true to the brand that paper is. And a lot of that brand was really tied up in the fact that people saw paper as a drawing tool. And we started to question that ourselves. And so thinking back on, hey, it's when ideas hit you in whatever form they hit you, ideas can come in any way and they should be expressed in any way. You should be able to express an idea as a photo, as a bit of text that you write down, just as well as you can a sketch. And so we started to kind of expand what we saw as sort of a definition of an idea. And it sort of forced us to think more about that squiggly, messy creativity aspect of paper itself and come up with some attributes around it. And really what matters when you're trying to get an idea out is speed. It needs to be very fast. It needs to be right there. Just quickly get you to that piece of paper. If there's one or too many steps there, you're just going to grab regular paper. It needs to be very simple. It can't be complicated. It needs to be very visual. We think very visually. It's a great form of memory, visual memory. And it just by nature needs to be very collaborative. So we started to take a look at those and then see how we might apply those to some of these new types of inputs. So one of the new types of inputs was around text formatting. And I'm just going to punch in some random words here. And so, of course you can type easy, but we added this gestural text formatting, so I'm actually like swiping on the text now to just quickly create checklists, or you can create bulleted lists, or you can create headers. So the idea was like, how can we just very quickly apply that idea of like fast and simple to a space that just hadn't thought about it yet. So then we turned our eye towards photos. And photos, what was important here was not just taking photos and applying filters, but when you actually combine it with ink, it gets really interesting. So you can actually do things like annotating directly on top of photos. And it actually becomes a very fast way to communicate. A lot of people have a hard time starting from a drawing, but starting from a photo is great. You can call something out and communicate an idea very quickly. So those were a few of the ways that we tried to address some of the emotional stakes and try and get into what paper would mean going to something like a phone. From a philosophical standpoint, an emotional standpoint, Amit here is going to tell you in detail about all the practical challenges.
So, once we had this pyramid figured out, right, it wasn't as clean as that, but sort of understood that what is our goal as a company, what's the philosophical layer, and then on top of that, the emotional layer that we need to deal with, which is people reacting to the brand, the changes in the brand, carrying things that they really love forward while still creating change and dynamicism in the product. Then there's the level of, okay, now let's go and start designing things and try to figure out if they really stick true to those things that we've figured out. And also, draw from those layers whenever we have decisions to make, right? Sometimes you have these product decisions you have to make. Should I go left or right? It's much, much easier to do it when you have some depth and some sort of solidified depth to draw decisions from. Okay. So practically, let's just get really simple here in terms of we needed a responsive model, right? That's where we start from. This thing cannot work on the same way it works on a big screen. It needs to react to the fact that it's being held in a certain way, that there's less real estate, and we had certain constraints. We wanted to see if we can get a little speedier. We'll talk a little bit about the gestures, how the gestures from an iPad changes to gestures on the phone. Very simply, if you think about the ergonomics of somebody using an iPad, for example, right? They're holding it like this. They're working with it. It's a sort of closed gesture. I'm working on my personal thing here like this, right? Whereas phone, just it opens up. One hand might be holding a subway rail, right? You're moving with one finger. It's already open. You're using this device in your daily life to communicate with other people, right? One of the things that we felt was successful about paper for the iPad was how it stayed true to the form factor of the iPad, and not just the physical form factor, but everything that an iPad means for people. And so we need to extend that same sensibility to the way that people use these handheld devices that are originally made for communication, right? So I'm going to show you, so we're going to start with the most obvious thing first, which is to take paper exactly as it is and see how it feels like on a phone, right? Let's start from what might work, maybe, who knows, right? And see how it feels. And so we always try to do these things first. Let's see if I can find the videos, right? So what you're seeing here is the same thing that you would see if you were using paper version 2 on an iPad, but running on a phone. And although it's cute and it's nice and it has some kind of nice moments to it, it clearly feels weird when you actually use it. You actually have to use it to see the weirdness of it. It's kind of small, you're pinching in, you're pinching out, you have to hold it in landscape mode. Does it fit these things that we were just talking about, right? On all of those 3 levels that Andrew described, and you take them all the way to the practicality of somebody holding the device in their hands on a daily basis and doing the things that they're used to doing with phones. And we felt that it is not doing it. So it was clear to us that we need to start exploring. Exploring. So the first exploration was to take a look at models for organization. In this case, you're seeing like you're moving the canvas to the side, and with one finger, you can go and move through content that once was bounded in a journal that now allows you to very quickly, imagine this with a thumb, move across different content. So that was one model that we looked at. And what you're seeing now are prototypes that were built either in JavaScript or Objective-C. I'll get a little bit behind the scenes of those things and can drill even deeper if you're interested later on. And just a word about that. It was important for us not just to create the mock-ups, which are very important, and the visual designs, which are very important, but because of everything that Andrew talked about leading to this point, it was important that we also understand the behavioral intelligence of these things that we're proposing. We need to touch them. We need to feel how they behave, how they feel to our fingertips. So in this case, it was worth the extra effort to go and make some pretty precise prototypes of the things that we were suggesting. So here's another example, a lot of content density here. This is all about seeing a lot of things, and then when you're ready to hone in, trying to sort them for you in a way that would make sense. So you're seeing sort of us drilling in through these different models of content navigation. Somewhat similar, but also different in many ways from the first one. It felt very different when we were touching it. Here's the third one, and this is the one we actually honed in on. An idea of these collection of stacks that open up and then in a very malleable way, while staying very physical, also allow you to move around, where the connection and the contact between where things are remain as you're moving in and out of the model, while still being able to move through them. And because we like that model, we expanded this prototype. And I know it kind of looks like the real app, but it really isn't. This is really an expansion of the prototype to try to bring in the creation aspect of the app and see how does it feel to create something, move into the navigational space, come back into the creation. So once we find out that after a few options there's something that really feels good, and we're kind of like, whew, that was kind of tiring. It was like, good job on prototyping all of this stuff and designing. That's when you actually gotta really get serious about moving even further and trying to take that prototype all the way to the place where as far as you can in terms of answering the questions that you're trying to answer. So I would say at this point it's fair to say we had a pretty good idea of what we want, and we felt that check marks on all those other levels, or those 2 other levels as well. And there was a question of, is this enough or not? And coming back again to this first point about what paper was and is for people originally, sometimes the refinement stage is extremely important to maintain those qualities. It's not always the case. It's impossible to refine everything, but I think one of the crafts, and you have to draw from those first 2 layers that Andrew was talking about, is to know what to refine, when to refine it, and why. Right? And so you can't refine everything, right? So what you're seeing here is an even more refined version of the prototype, where it's like we're now creating text ideas in there as well. Features that would typically want to take straight into development, we still felt like as part of the design process, we want to see how those hybrid ideas of text and images feel together. Remember, one of those emotional aspects that Andrew was talking about is expanding from a tool that was created for drawing into something that opens up other mediums. So we want to make sure that those things feel natural, they can live naturally together. And so that was, this refinement phase came to answer that question of these hybrid ideas. Then what happens when you want to organize your ideas? What happens when you want to move things around? How should it feel? How should it look? How much movement should there be around? How much should we let you know in advance what's happening as you're moving things? These were questions that felt seminal if we wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable dealing with a lot of media on their device. This isn't going to get technical, but just a little bit about the tools for doing all of this. So remember, this is a design team that is thinking very deeply about product and about the process as a whole. And what you're seeing here is sort of the myriad of tools that we use to prototype. And you can see there isn't just one magic tool. There's like a layer of things that we use based on the questions that we need to answer. So there is no easy answer to how do you do these things. You have to pick the right tools for the job. And in fact, this changes and grows all the time. This isn't even the latest. If I had to check, I'm sure there's something else that should go in there. Although it's a pretty recent slide. So what I'll do is I'll show you a tool that we've actually developed for ourselves internally in the design team. We call it Scout. And I'll talk about why we needed this tool and how it helps us design fast enough and at the same time keep a level of refinement that we felt is necessary. Okay, so what you're going to see, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the stuff was designed and programmed in JavaScript, which isn't something that you typically, or it's getting more common that you would associate it also with things that run on iOS devices, but it isn't necessarily the default solution for a lot of these things. And so what we're doing here is we're creating a situation where in the center there is a browser, just a regular Chrome browser, and you're seeing that all of the development is actually being done as if you're developing for the browser, which means you never actually have to test anything on the device. You can just keep working inside the browser. And the promise is, what you're seeing here is an actual real phone. The promise is, it's not a simulation of the phone, it's a mirroring of a real phone. The promise is whatever you do on the browser will look the same on the phone. And so we're going to change the background to pink, which allows you for pretty quick iterations and testing. What you want to know is that when you move to the phone, there's a bunch of prototypes here. You can see all of the prototypes are always available to everybody in the company to take a look at, which is another interesting thing. But you can see that once you load the prototype, as it's loading up, it's going to have those updates. Why is this important? It sounds kind of like a technical sort of little detail. Why is this important? It's important because we do a lot of our design work on the desktop generally, right? And there's something to be able to stay on the desktop, work at the speed of the desktop, work with the same tools. You saw that, like a lot of tools there, including Photoshop and a bunch of tools that are design heavy tools. It's great to be in that same environment, in that same headspace as you're developing and iterating, while knowing at the back of your mind that whenever you want to, you can go and actually look at the thing in the device and you will not have to change anything. That little moment of trust allows people to kind of stay focused and move very, very fast, and also refine things and not waste time on refinement, having to worry about how it's going to look on a native device. So sometimes little things like this, we just lock them in with our own tools and then make sure that we can just run through them. And it actually makes the process of refining much, much easier, which comes back to creating the products that we want to be known for. Lastly, you would think this is it, right? Okay, you finessed the product, what now? There's the final tuning of the product. So I remind you, all of this is being done without actual real development, taking place. We like to think of prototyping kind of like working in clay, and then when we got the mold, when we know sort of what's going on, then the really good developers need to come in and pour the bronze, right? And then once that's done, we need to tune it. And one of the most amazing thing about our developers is the amount of options that they always keep open for design, even after the thing has been entirely developed, right? So you're seeing this is actually the app, the real app running on an iPad at this point. And you're seeing just the variables that are used to figure out how to sort of randomize a little bit the stacks. Right? So you're seeing Alan, one of our designers, who designed a lot of the visuals that you're seeing here actually, play around with some of these variables to figure out how the system would respond to different gestures and to different layouts. There are hundreds of these things, hundreds of these sliders. And it's at this point, this is a wonderful sort of communication bandwidth between the developers and the designers all the way through the process, even after it has left and been handed off to development. We're keeping that connection between the teams alive through these kind of mechanisms. Challenges. So, considering everything that we've looked at here, you could see that we're trying to figure out small screen, big experience. We're trying to figure out how to do everything with one finger, right? These are like really practical things. Let's not forget. Again, I want to make sure there's the high level concepts or things that we can draw from, but there's always, you got to remember those very, very physical things, very practical things that we need to make sure we hit on, right? Be true to the nature of a mobile device, a truly mobile device that's with you any place. I think we actually went through these because I showed you all the videos.
Thanks for walking us through that. So just to get back to, the three levels that we were looking at the highest level, the philosophical level, ultimately what we're trying to do is answer this question of how paper and creativity can move from a single person to a multitude of people, to a team. The next level below that, at the emotional level, we're looking at how we can expand the brand. And it's not something that's easy to do, and it's something that takes some time. But we are looking at how we can expand that. And then at the very practical level, I think Amit showed you how we sort of think about evolving a model and a navigational model from something that's very bespoke and custom to one device to how it can become something more of a platform. So we actually have the same model, not only working on the iPhone, but working on the iPad, working on the web, and whatever else comes down. So there's kind of a question of, well, what's next? Really, that big question around what it's like for all of us to work together, we think is still a bit of an open question. And so it's something that we're working very hard on right now. And in fact, this whole presentation was put together with Amit and myself and a few others on the team, sort of working collaboratively together to create all the slides, create all the content for it. So that's something that we're working on, and We're actually in a sort of alpha period right now where we're testing out how this type of functionality might work in other teams. And so if there are any designers here on design teams that are interested in giving it a run with a number of people on your team that use Paper already, that's kind of what we're looking for. So feel free to approach us after the talk here. So Paper, if you don't have it, it's on the App Store, iPhone and iPad. And thank you very much, guys. And we'll be here for Q&A. Thank you.
Is any of the thinking that's gone into the iPhone app, is that going into the iPad app now? Are there any things you want to take back to the iPad?
Yeah, so actually all the model stuff that Amit walked through, all that stuff is in the iPad as well.
One of the things we do in the prototyping process as well and design process is the tool that I just showed there is that you could load the same JavaScript thing on the iPhone and on the iPad to sort of see how they react to both devices simultaneously. So whenever we can, we try to just like have things pushed as well. It's not always possible, but whenever we can, we try to do that earlier the better, we find.
How long did the original design of the app take?
I'm sorry.
How long did it take you to design the app originally? The iPad app?
So the question was, how long did it take us to originally design the original iPad app? It was about 8 months, and it was literally myself and one developer. So, yeah. Sometimes small teams can be efficient too.
So first of all, just congratulations on the apps.
Congratulations on the app itself. And ThinkKit is phenomenal, so a lot of great stuff coming out. One of the things that I experienced as one user transitioning from iPad to iPhone is the iPhone experience. I think you guys used this analogy, but it's the sticky note concept, right? So you're creating sticky notes, sort of jotting down ideas. One of the challenges I think you have with that analogy, I'm curious to like hear how you approach it, is sticky notes themselves should sort of be ephemeral, like you sort of jot it down, but there's this risk of card, right? Everyone's idea of a good work situation like walls crammed with sticky notes. So I'm curious, do you guys have opinions about that? Are you thinking about how to sort of help people be productive in general, or are you sort of remaining agnostic, basically saying like however you want to use it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think everyone heard that. So it's a good question. It's why a lot of what we're working on now is actually, we consider a few phases in the creative process, right? Like you gather a bunch of ideas, you open things up, you explore, and then at some point you want to whittle down. You want to narrow in on a direction. And then typically you want to share it, give feedback, and that sort of thing. We think we do pretty well at the first phase right now, and so we're looking at ways that we can help with the second phase to kind of help you whittle down, and potentially like the more ephemeral stuff drops away. So it's something that we're looking at now, I think. Especially it becomes very important as like teams work together, because then there's a bunch of noise, and how do you kind of hide that noise and focus in on the true signal? I think it's interesting. Yeah, in the back.
So first, again, congratulations on the amazing product. Like, I think we're very big fans of what you guys do and how you guys like implement it. It's just so props on that. And then the question is, what's there? They don't want to hear that. So all right. The question is, do you guys ever thought about releasing this as a separate product from the whole offering? So you can have sort of like a sketchbook paper and then this, like paper ideas or something like that. Did that ever cross your guys' minds or something?
It did. It was a big debate, so we thought a lot about it, and ultimately we had to come down to, it came down to some user experience questions, like if I'm someone who uses both devices, I just want them to work together, and unfortunately, we're coming out with sync soon, so they will actually talk to one another and be able to sync ideas. But the other thing was just on a more practical and business level, like we just don't have the bandwidth, unfortunately, to maintain two separate products like that, with potentially two different audiences and two different use cases. And so we just decided that we needed to go this path, so we sort of knuckled down and went that way.
First of all, congratulations. I've seen it in my early stages. I'm using it for a while, I'm soon at and I think the first question is about the community. I think you have the option, we were talking about working in teams and small teams, but then you have the option to share with the wider community. And what's your thoughts about that? And is there any kind of like plans about the community? And the second question is maybe about the challenges working within smaller teams. So building up this presentation was like the hardest part.
About putting the presentation together.
together working this.
Yeah, so the first part about community, we love our community. It's still very strong and still very growing. And if anyone hasn't seen it, if you go to paper.553.com, it's just people sharing things publicly. So everything there is public. We did a lot of very bold things, I think, in terms of like rights. So everything shared is public domain, so that anyone can take it and remix it, build off of everyone else's work. So it's a very strong and growing community still. And we think that's always going to be a part of paper, but as soon as we put that out there, we got a bunch of people saying, hey, that's fantastic. I just wish I had something like that, but just for my team, so that we could share and work off of each other's work locally. And so to some degree, that's kind of what we're doing now, which is like, how do we build that functionality for smaller teams? And as far as building this presentation, yeah, it was great. It's nice, it's nice when you don't have to do everything yourself. Like you pop it open and you see someone else filling in blanks for you, and it feels like the future. Yeah.
So, I love a product I've been using for a long time. I think you made a really, really gutsy move in the transition from the iPhone to the iPad. And as somebody who used it early on, I got thrown off the ride for a little bit. But as I started using it, I realized the choices you made were really great, and I come to really like it again. And I wonder about the internal debate and the internal process that you went through in making those changes, knowing you were alienating the community, hoping they'd come back to you.
Yeah, again, it was a tough choice, and it really just came down to where we thought we needed to go. And I think it can sound kind of selfish, but it's kind of what got us to where we are today, which is we're trying to build products that we want to use ourselves. And we're creative makers ourselves, and so we want products that work the way that we think. And we think that's it's okay. We'll probably lose some people, but we actually run the numbers. It's not that much. It's pretty low single digits. But we just felt like it's where we needed to go. So we did it. But it was a bit scary.
Part of this talk about those emotional aspects of doing the transition, being aware and respectful of users who we knew are going to have to go through this transition. There's been a lot of work, a lot of just like nitty-gritty work to make sure that we're delivering the same quality of experiences as we perceive them, but at the same time moving people forward, because we knew, or we have this feeling of where as Anna was mentioning, where interesting things can happen collaboratively in the same way they're happening individually, but we do have to be respectful and hoist people along with that view, right? Yeah, that's I think that's a. It takes a lot of attention to detail.
One more question. Right here up front.
Thanks for sharing your comment. And I'm also just curious about your prototype process, and I wonder who's giving you the feedback that fits you, who audience that are doing the user testing, and you have a process around that. So,
Yeah, we do. So it's a great question. The first audience for the prototype is actually us. We just need to make sure that things feel the way that we think they should. And each prototype needs to answer a very specific question that we have with design. Questions that we feel that we are not clear enough on before we send things to the next step. So that's one layer. And then a wonderful second thread to that is being able to do user tests with actual prototypes that are refined, because what you get, the quality of feedback that you get from showing people things that they could actually move around, even if it's within a constraint, right, is more valuable. We feel we get more out of that. And in fact, some of these prototyping systems allowed us to change the prototype almost instantaneously throughout user testing. So we could, or in fact, I think at one point we actually were changing things as people were testing, which is very, very handy. Somebody has an opinion that we want to understand, we could tweak something and then test it right there and then, or test it with the next user. Who is that audience? It really is very, very large. I mean, we have a wonderful designer, Paula, who is great with